My name is Lisa Newton. I have been a college professor for longer than anyone wants to know. I graduated from Columbia University with a Ph.D. in 1967, following undergraduate education at Swarthmore College and the School of General Studies at Columbia. I went briefly to Hofstra University to teach. My first year there, I spent, I think, considerably more time peace marching than teaching, and the head of the department took umbrage at that and dismissed me. So I found a job at Fairfield University, which was very lucky because by the time I would have come up for tenure at Hofstra, had I done brilliantly there, Hofstra was in a tenure freeze while I was tenured at Fairfield University. So it was a long and happy career there. They allowed me to apply for a grant for the National Endowment for the Humanities. At the time, I should go back and fill in Fairfield University a little bit. It was a small Jesuit school. There were under 3,000 students there when I got there. They were all boys, and they were all Catholic. And the year I got there, they had just discontinued required daily Mass. So I came into a place that was very, very strange to me. I had never met a Catholic priest in my life until I found 6 of them interviewing me. The result tightened my nerves quite a bit, but I found them the friendliest place in the world. They had absolutely no experience with professional academia. And they thought that I was amazing with my Ph.D. from Columbia University and indulged me in everything I wanted unless I got in the way of some of their power brokers, one of whom was the department chairman for the philosophy department. But when I battled him, I won. I think they thought my idea of having ethics across the curriculum, which was where I started, was a really good one. My first field was really medical ethics rather than business ethics. And because of my Yale contacts, I was specialized in ethics of research with human subjects. At that point, that was ethics of research with human subjects was a matter of national scrutiny because there had been some nasty scandals in the field. So they appointed a batch of people who should know something about what's right and wrong, priests and CEOs and things like that, making sure they didn't get any two people of the same faith or the same philosophical background so that they couldn't possibly agree on any general principles beforehand, which meant that they had to do their reasoning. This is the, I'm trying to remember the exact name of the committee, but it was a committee for the protection of human subjects of biomedical and behavioral research. And no two of them could agree on any set of principles. So they had to move from case to case. They picked up the case method, which they picked up from the common law. Legal philosophy was my background, so I glommed onto that one immediately. And moving from case to case, they were able to come out with a set of very good, sane regulations for the conduct of research with human subjects. Then they called in a philosopher, Tom Beecham, to write up their conclusions in some brief form, and Tom turned out the Belmont Report, which essentially went through their discussions and discovered empirically what principles they had in fact appealed to, rather than what principles they took as fundamental. In fact, they had appealed to 4 principles as they saw it in research with human subjects, which is 1, don't hurt people, non-maleficence. 2, help people if you possibly can, beneficence. You put those 2 together and they come up with utilitarianism, which is the way philosophers have interpreted that ever since. The second principle, or the third, if you're counting, was the principle of obedience to moral law, in which you reason differently. You don't reason consequentially, you reason non-consequentially. the guiding principle here is justice, and they appealed to the principle of fairness and justice, even when they had agreed ahead of time that they didn't have any common principles. And the last principle was the principle of autonomy, or respect for persons. Let people make their own choices. In human research with human subjects, that's very important. The human subject should be able to opt out, should be required to consent before you go ahead with it, and he should be able to opt out of anything that becomes tortuously difficult. So those were their 4 principles: non-maleficence, beneficence, justice, and respect for persons. And I took a look at that, and I started looking around at the other fields of ethics, engineering ethics, environmental ethics for that matter, and concluded that, you could take these 4 principles and make a general ethic that could go across the curriculum, which is what I proceeded to do. Then I went to the National Endowment for the Humanities and put in for a pilot grant to develop a seminar on ethics, bioethics specifically. Got the grant. By this time, I have the philosophy department furious at me because they've never heard of the National Endowment for the Humanities, let alone grants, let alone forming seminars on grants. I was the first person to get a grant in the humanities in the entire university. So we got our seminar going. Didn't do too well, actually, because nobody knew quite what to do with it in the structure. But we went ahead with it, got some more grants, and ended up teaching several ethics seminars. And I finally put in for a seminar on business ethics, and that actually did go rather well. We recruited in some of the local CEOs, and Fairfield County has a lot of CEOs living there. Recruited some of the local ones, had a wonderful time with them. And the university was very impressed. I think they were more impressed by the wealth and influence of the CEOs we brought in than by our profound philosophical discussions with them. But the business school, which had formed and was growing rapidly, the business school made it a required course, made business ethics a required course to be taken in the junior year for every business major. That's how I discovered business ethics. I had to teach it. And so luckily at that time, by another miracle, the last academic vice president had required that all faculty every other semester teach 4 courses rather than our standard 3. And it isn't easy to just create that an extra course out of nothing in the middle of a curriculum. So what they did was they let these extra people, especially in the business school, come and team teach with me so that we could team teach these business ethics courses. Well, first of all, that gave them a little more plausibility since I didn't know squat about business. And it made them a lot more fun for me because I could interact with the business professors. And pretty soon we had a program accepted by the whole college. You have to go through 100 committees, but I was pretty good at that by that time, for a program in applied ethics, which I rapidly made certain became one of the core requirements. It didn't actually become a core requirement, but our core requirement had been every student in the school had to take 2 courses in philosophy and 2 courses in religious studies. After all, this is a Jesuit school. You expect that kind of requirement. And then students had to take 1 course more, besides those 4, had to take a 5th course, which could be philosophy or religious studies, and I soon made sure that that requirement read philosophy, religious studies, or applied ethics. So now we had a built-in audience because every student took 1 look at the philosophy and religious studies offerings and 1 look at the applied ethics offerings, and I had every student in the school. So we did famously with that. To finish that story, the story of program development, when I retired, I turned the whole program over to my business sidekick. I had a bioethics sidekick in the philosophy department, but he didn't really want to take it over. He wasn't the administrative type. But my sidekick in the business school, David Schmidt, did want to take it over. And he very rapidly, he was much better at working the hierarchy than I was. He very rapidly got that changed to Center for Applied Ethics. And in an amazing feat, he took one of the donors that I had taken out to lunch once a year, who had donated directly to our program, and got him to create a legacy to endow the whole center. So now that is an endowed center at Fairfield University. I couldn't be prouder of him. I take personal responsibility and personal delight for my younger colleagues in applied ethics, because the field did not exist at Fairfield University until I got there. And they have done wonderfully in the field. Okay, now that's really my history with it. I retired. I came up to Wake Robin because my most responsible daughter lived in Ferrisburg, which is right next door. And she was the one who found Wake Robin for me. And I've been very happy here. And I've published 5 more books.
Yes, now tell us about your research.
All right. My research has been primarily in joint fields. I think I may have something here on it. This isn't it. I didn't bring it with me. But my most substantial book is a Business Ethics in the Natural Environment, in which I set out the proofs that are common in the field that, as a matter of fact, taking very, very good care of the environment is in the interest of business, not just the long-term interest that it would be nice to have a planet to live on, but the short-term interest too, that by paying attention to the environmental impacts, they can actually save money in the company. What the 3M company managed to do, but they found out that they could economize on their processes a whole lot just to save the environment, and found it saved them money too. Now, let me put in a side comment here, and you may want to edit this out. I have spent much of my business ethics career going through a case after case with my colleagues, arguing that being very good is in the best interest of business, and therefore businesses should pay a great deal of attention to ethics. And the more I looked into those cases, the more I discovered that, as a matter of fact, that was wrong. It is not in business's interest to try to be very good, not if it's trying to make money, which, according to the shareholders, is all it should be trying to do. If, by the way, you can show them something that's going to save them money, they'll do it, just to save the money. But be good in order to save money, or be good in order to prosper, doesn't work very well. I remember I can't, watch me forget another name, in a Business Ethics and the Environment anthology put together by the dean of UVM Business School long ago, Sharma. There was a writer, Andrew Hoffman, does that name ring a bell? No. Okay. Who's arguing that there are a good many, much like your arguments, Pat, that businesses acquire psychological directions that make it very difficult for them to do the right thing there, because it just seems that this is the orderly way to do things. And it was psychological obstacles to doing the right thing in business. And he proceeded to show all these psychological obstacles to doing the right thing, thinking if only business could overcome these psychological obstacles, we'd have a much more environmentally friendly business. I took a look at all those obstacles. It wasn't in the executives' anyway, best interest to make those things. The executives' best interest, what they want to do is enrich themselves, and is what they wanted to do, lay in maintaining the habit-forming course that they had been following. And until something went seriously wrong, they had no reason to change their course. They were making money for the shareholders, they were making money for themselves, and nothing in their playbook said they should be doing anything else. All right. Now, I attribute this insight to John Boatwright, although he denies it. As a matter of fact, you can't have a business ethics because when a person signs on to be a manager and part of any executive team and in any business, he makes a promise to the shareholders. We're just talking about the public. He makes a promise to the shareholders or to the investors, donors, whatever, that he's going to increase their money. And he really doesn't have any right to do anything else. Yes, the person who is employed by a major public corporation already has a moral obligation, which he has no right to skirt. I taught it this way. You decide that you've run out of milk. You're going to walk downtown, which is very close, and you're going to get yourself some more milk. On the way, you pass your neighbor. Tell your neighbor what you're doing. He says, "Oh, can you get one for me too?" He gives you some money. You put the money in your pocket. On the way down to town, you discover a needy beggar, a woman with 2 small children who really needs help. Of course, you can give her your milk money. Question, can you give her your neighbor's milk money? And the answer is no. It's not yours to give. And on the same reason, the corporate executive cannot spend money that is not his, it's the investors, cannot spend money on any cause except advancing the investor's interest. Now, of course, we get around that. And we get around that by saying, well, there are a lot of good reasons. Corporate image, community goodwill, where you can show it really is in the corporation's interest to be a good citizen, a guest in the community. Whose formula was that? One of our best business ethicists who happened to be a CEO of something.
I don't know who the CEO was, but certainly.
It sounds like, yeah, sounds like Goodpasture. I think Goodpasture picked up on it. All right. So there's all kinds of good reasons why you can say, well, it's really in your self-interest to be all kinds of charitable. Yeah, it is, and then sometimes it isn't. And when it isn't, you have no right to do it. Because your self-image is the only one, the increase of the money of the prosperity of the corporation is your only duty and your only right. So, I thought that was the general conclusion of Boatwright's Is Business Ethics Based on a Mistake? He says no, he didn't mean that at all. He meant something else, but he's not going to tell me what it is. We leave it at that. It's a little like trying to find out from Ed Freeman what stakeholder theory means. Does it mean watch out for these stakeholders because they can bite you and so it's in your best interest to get ahead of them? Or are you saying you really owe something to these other stakeholders? Okay. Where was I? Yeah. So anyway, I found business ethics difficult to get along with for that reason. I can make sense of the moral obligations of a physician. There's the obligation to the patient, which would transcend by the way, any laws, any customs, any siloing, whatever, that he found himself in. He's got the moral obligation that pulls through all of that. I can make sense of the moral obligation of the engineer, which brings us back to the 738 MAX. Those engineers knew full well there was something wrong with that arrangement, the MCAS. And they should have done something about it, and they couldn't because, as a matter of fact, they'd been fired or otherwise made useless. What?
They still could have.
They still could have. Okay. So the engineers had an ethic there, which was strongly violated by the machine that they were working on. The businessmen, on the other hand, did you get a chance to read that piece I sent you? Yeah. It's that last paragraph that keeps coming back to me and haunt me. There was one of the an investment professional who had his entire family on that flight and lost 3 kids and a wife and his mother-in-law. And I was utterly devastated. Everything he had lived for was gone. And he concluded, he was in an interview with Kasich, however you pronounce that. In his interview, he said that, of course, he'd been watching what had happened to the Boeing stock, which had gone up and up and up all of the time that these crashes were taking place. And he said, of course, he'd never buy any for himself after this, but he'd have a great deal of difficulty justifying leaving it out of a client's portfolio because it was such a profitable stock. Okay. Somewhere along the line, the questions given to me asked, where do you think the future of business ethics lies? Well, one of the places I think it lies, this is only one, you got to go back to investigating capitalism. Maybe we just don't have capitalism under control yet. Maybe as long as we not only tolerate but practically obligate executives working continually and very effectively for the prosperity of the company's shareholders, maybe these crashes are just something we have to absorb. And if we don't want to absorb them, if we don't want to permit them, then we're going to have to go back and question capitalism.
But then in what ways would you question it?
I'm not sure. I mean, I can give you some historical possibilities. Capitalism in agriculture is one of the things that I'm approaching now.
Yes, and tell us about that.
Oh, sure.
I want to hear about that research.
Okay. But anyway, one of the guides there is Eric Holt Jimenez, A Foodie's Guide to Capitalism. He thinks capitalism explains everything that's wrong in agriculture, and he may be right. All right? I've taken that up briefly, not briefly, in my urban agriculture book, which is forthcoming from Springer. It's now complete. I have a couple of emails into the editors saying, can you tell me anything about the possibility of publishing in this century? But
Oh, that's nasty.
yeah.
They will.
Compared to Rutledge, which was back to you in a minute with, we're in publication. All right, anyway.
They did the book. That's different.
Okay. And I'm going to do it again in my next book, which is about the beef industry. And it's the first 3 chapters are case studies. Now, big beef, little beef, and no beef. No beef being the Impossible Burger, which is, if you people have a long time to send out, we'll all go up to Burger King and we can share Impossible Burgers.
But there's no meat.
Where's the beef?
Exactly. None. So, and the capitalist system has intervened in all agriculture, including the growing of beef for food, beef cattle for food. The middlemen rule it. The people who supply the machinery and the feed, and the ranchers are scattered and disorganized and can't possibly become anything other than price takers. And then the consumers, of course, hey, this is cheap beef. They love it. Anything you do to improve the industry will raise the price of beef, and that has very firm opposition. Cheap beef has made the beef cattle industry what it is. So there are a lot of difficulties there, and I'm going to have a lot of fun with them.
So, why would it be? What would you have to do? In other words, feed them, have all grass-fed beef? What?
Well, if you have all grass-fed beef, that's little beef. Okay, that's my second chapter. First chapter is big beef. Second chapter, little beef. Growing fairly small numbers of beef cattle on grass finished. Now, the big beef people have an objection to grass-finished beef, which is that as grass is different all over the place, the beef is going to taste different. And one reason why we finish cattle on corn, I know they don't digest it very well, but they all taste the same. You can buy a steak anywhere, and it's going to taste the same as every other steak. because they're all finished on the same food. Okay, now where was I going with that?
Well, I was asking you about your big beef.
Big beef, little beef.
Oh yeah, big beef and little beef. All right, so little beef, you know, your steak won't taste exactly the same as the neighbor's steak, but that's okay. It'll taste good, and the cow will have a very happy life. And since we believe that animals cannot foresee and fear death, the cow will be perfectly happy, the steer will be perfectly happy its entire life munching grass. Then you can be slaughtered humanely. We know how to do that. And sold to the consumer immediately, and you cut out the middleman completely. The only trouble is it's very expensive to raise cattle this way, and it's going to cost more money. How much more money? We know there's a premium for organic, no? But what are we willing to pay? In my agriculture book, I include the story of my Thanksgiving turkey. One of my daughters works on an organic farm, an educational farm. It's called Stone Barns. It's in Westchester County, and it's a mirror image of Shelburne Farms here. You know, they raise cattle humanely, organically, and they also raise turkeys humanely. And I think you could probably get the name of the turkey if you wanted to. And, but my daughter, as a gift to the family, ordered a Thanksgiving turkey. You have to put your request in early. And she wasn't sure how big the turkey was going to be. It depended on environmental conditions, some of which were not predictable. So my daughter up here, who hosts Thanksgiving, asked me if I would mind picking up a sort of a backup turkey in case they came up with an 8-pounder. So I did. And she brought in a big 18-pound turkey. It was beautiful. It tasted yummy. It would cost her $10 a pound, which is about what it cost to raise the thing. It's a total of $180. Then the turkey I got here up from Price Chopper, which is right up the road in Burlington, goes 51 cents a pound, 21 pounds. It cost me $11. Now, I'm willing to pay a premium for organic and humanely raised, but a premium from $11 to $180 is not digestible, not in the American spirit. So we've got a long way to go if we're going to move from the CAFOs, the confined area feeding organizations, whatever you call them, to get to the raising a grass-fed cow in the backyard. It's got a long ways to go, and I don't see any easy answers there. That is one answer, though.
But you don't think capitalism of competition can take care of that? Eventually? And demand?
Well, demand has been fairly standard, and the reading I've done in the background for, you can prove it by Price Chopper's turkeys, which are now selling for 37 cents a pound, or you can go by this reading I've been doing on the emergence of big beef, which is that the American consumer likes it cheap and will not tolerate anything that permanently raises the price. So we're going to have a very hard time getting capitalism to do anything other than try to make it cheaper in order to increase the market. So if we're going to have our food differently, we're going to have to do it in some non-capitalist way. And Eric Holt Jimenez is one of the best ones for proving this. He's been doing it book after book after book after book for the last 15, 20 years. And where was I going with this? All right. That is the answer. Can capitalism solve the problems of the food system? Answer, no. Capitalism has created the problems in our food systems, and we're going to have to make some very non-capitalist decisions to get out of there. Now, one of the trends that the reading I've been doing on beef makes very clear, and it's clear really, is the rejection of regulation. Regulation could.
Can you say that again? We have to look back.
Oh, okay. One of the things that the literature makes very clear is that those involved in the capitalist system, in food, providing food, are not willing to accept regulation, and they will lobby intensively and continually to keep that regulation down. Now, we tend right now to be in an anti-regulatory phase due to the predilections of the current administration. But even in a friendly administration, the anti-regulatory push is very, very strong. In the environment, in provisions of food and drugs, it's part of capitalism, and I don't know what we're going to do about it, except to say, decry it. But philosophers are good at doing that, but it doesn't get anywhere.
So how do you deal then with in developing countries where there's such a great need for food?
Well, the research I was doing for the chapter in quite a bit of research actually for the chapter in the second edition of Alleviating Poverty suggested actually if you get a few interferences out of there, the developing world can feed itself very well indeed. What I discovered, the case that I submitted there, was a place where they went back to very old organic ways of growing their food, which turned out to be much more useful, much more profitable than the newer ways that were suggested. It had to do with can you impose Western methods, which are very much more efficient? Well, you can if you get enough rainfall. If you don't get enough rainfall, you're going to have to do something else. And so they did something else, and it really worked. So the developing nations are going to, first of all, they're going to have to fight the same battles that first world nations have to fight in order to get government regulation to curb the capitalist impulses, which will come in there, displace all the local farmers, put in 40 acres of pineapple, and which the people can't eat. They are now sold to the developed world, and growing what?
And provide jobs.
Well, it'll provide jobs, but those jobs are all the displaced farmers.
Well, they're not all.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're women. I visited pineapple.
Well, most of the farmers in the developing world are women.
I know, but I mean, they're not all women who had their own farms.
No, there are women who did the farming on something they owned with their husbands.
Yes.
And that farm has now been displaced, and the husbands are unemployed, and the women are unemployed. And when you hire them back at wages that are rather useless in a non-cash economy, they can spend the wages, and they're glad for the wages, and they wish the wages were a little more generous. But it is nothing like first of all, the food, what they're doing, growing those pineapples, is not going to feed them. What they were doing, growing the corn and vegetables before their farm was gobbled up, was feeding them. So the jobs, I mean, when you're a farmer, you don't have a job, you have a farm. And they'd been doing rather well as farmers. Not as well as they could have done. Again, what happened in Ghana was they didn't need any Western help. What they needed was an NGO to come in and say, "Why don't you do what your ancestors did?" "Oh, well, yeah, we can do that," and that got their farms going again. Ways of planting that I had never heard of, digging little holes and putting manure in the little holes. I'd never heard of that. We don't do that here. Digging for water in strange places, pruning trees to feed the goats. I never heard of that. We don't do that here. If we're going to feed goats, we go down to the mill and buy food for the goats. So they did things that we would not have thought of. We are not bringing first world or developed world technologies to bear there. They're using their old technologies, and they're working.
But what about, for example, you did a case on the pump, the special pump for public
Yes.
water.
Mhm. All right, again, that is
Explain what that is.
the pump. Okay.
So that I'm not explaining. Yeah.
All right. There's a problem of irrigation over much of the developing world, in Africa especially. There's water, but the water isn't where the crops are. And so what you do is you have a couple of teenage kids to carry buckets of water from the river and splash it on the crops. But it's getting harder to get keep those kids, keep dozens of kids around the farm, there and elsewhere. So an entrepreneur developed a pump, a kickstart pump, is called it, because you put the one end in the river and the other end on your field, and then there's a pump. I don't know how they prime it, but they get the water in it somehow, and then all I have to do is bounce up and down on the pump, and water comes out and irrigates the field. It's a very, very simple device. And that company, the Kickstart company, has several different devices for different kinds of problems. Some, you dig a well and it'll get the water out of the well for the river. It is a beautiful device and exactly the sort of thing that is needed all over the lot. And the beauty of this particular enterprise is it's profitable, which means it fits nicely into a capitalist system. It is profitable. It's easy to use, easy to understand, doesn't insult the intelligence while we're at it, doesn't require any Westerner to come in and show you how to work it, and is effective in growing more crops. So that's when you can get places where there's just a simple device, simple solution. This is wonderful. Now, it doesn't solve very many problems. How many farms are too dry but close enough to a river so you can get this kind of thing? It's a very partial solution, but where it works beautifully. Okay, we need that kind of thinking, that kind of imagination all over the developing world. But this bit of, you've got these idlers in the cities in the developing world, which tear your heart out. There's just no jobs. The kind of job you look for is a job of regulating traffic at a corner, because you can collect tolls, essentially bribes, from the people who are using that traffic. Now, of course, you can't keep all that money you collect. You have to pay it to the guy who hired you, pay some of it to the guy who hired you, and on up the line. It's a chain of corruption that was described in one of the works I read, and I had to put it down. I was getting sick to my stomach. All right, so we've got a long way to go. Some of the, if you want to find out about it, some of the current coverage of problems in Ukraine will tell you a little bit about how these quota systems work to get corruption up the chain to the big guy who's really enjoying it. And unfortunately, he has to hire the gunmen to go out and enforce the system. So, and then when a Western company comes in and sits down with the ruler of the country, or some part of the ruling elite of the country, in this city with the idlers running around and nobody having jobs, I can supply 2,500 jobs if you'll let me just take over this portion of the country. And so they let them do it, and unfortunately, the 2,500 jobs have to go first to all the people they have displaced in that area of the country. And those wages do not in any way replace the independent farming that they did before. So we have got a major problem. The problems of the developing world, and agricultural especially, are not all attributable to to first world interferences, but some of them are. We can stop that at least.
So you see that. So you think that's part of the research future research in business ethics should be on those kinds of questions.
Yeah. Where are, before we try to move our developed world solutions into places that seem to need solutions of some kind, let's take a look at what we could do reinforcing the customs, hierarchies, methods that they use before capitalism ever got there. And we'll probably do a whole lot better for them. Rather, because capitalism is essentially an extractive industry, like mining. Its job is to take money out of wherever it was and put it in the pockets of whoever's running the system.
But if we change that mindset, that extractive mindset,
Yeah.
is capitalism rescuable?
I probably, after all, the NGO that helped out my people in Ghana, encouraging them to go back to methods that most of the people there had forgotten, but the NGO, being an agricultural NGO, had carefully preserved them. Those were Western-trained people. They were native to the region, but they were Western-trained. And they were able to see how a solution, essentially an indigenous solution, or reapplication of an indigenous solution, could solve the problem that the people were facing. So that's capitalist thinking, or it's inventive thinking.
But it can be capitalist.
What? It can be capitalist, yeah. But it's a long distance from the the extractive activity with the Boeing Corporation that we have been watching. Let's see how much money we can get out of this company to give to the shareholders, to give to the investors, and without paying attention to what was being starved as they extracted that money.
Good example.
Yeah.
Any other cases you can think about that you'd like to talk about, or other topics? Have you worked? Have you stopped working in healthcare in bioethics? Or?
Not exactly. One of the first, that was my proudest taking sides series.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, let's talk about some of these publications you got.
Okay. No, bioethics was one of the first things I wrote about when I got. What happened was Springer had been talking to me with varying degrees of enthusiasm about putting together a single volume of all of my teaching materials, which were extensive at that time. I had case histories.
Yes.
And then they decided against it because it struck them that a very large book on applied ethics, many fields thereof, was not going to sell. And I agreed with them. But meanwhile, they were trying a new line of publication called the Briefs, Springer Briefs. And would I like to be an editor for that series? They apparently had abandoned the project with me completely. And I said, well, sure. So they sent me some proposals for briefs to review, and they were terrible, just awful. So I don't want to talk about them. But I said, look, you don't want to publish my teaching materials book, my single volume of applied ethics. Why don't you publish it as 4 separate briefs? And bioethics was one of them. And business ethics was another of them. Ta-da. And environmental ethics was another of them, American experience in environmental. Now, I stuck with America here because if I try going abroad when I don't know the languages, it seems, and then the basis for the whole thing, which I was going to use for the introductory part of this text, is an introduction to ethics. That's when I sent out that took the case of the guy who ran into another car in a parking garage late at night. And he's coming, there's a New York City parking garage, and he's coming down from Connecticut. And by the time he hits that car, he's drunk and he's high. And the question is, what should he do now that he's crashed into another car and there isn't anybody in the parking garage to see him? Should he run away, leave the scene of the accident, or or should he call the police? Well, he should call the police, but by the time the police get through with him, drunk, high, operating a vehicle too fast, he's just gotten his law license and legal practice, he might be in a lot of trouble for the rest of his profession. So, on the other hand, if he quietly retreats to Connecticut, he's no damage to his car at all. Quietly retreats to Connecticut, I mean when the guy comes down and finds his car has been hit, he's going to be very unhappy, but his insurance will take care of it. And at least you won't get the horrible... Ethicists are really good at giving advice, but the consequences of that advice have to be borne by the person who takes the advice, not by the ethicist. So I go through several forms of reasoning and conclude that if at least one kind of utilitarian analysis would say, go quietly back to Connecticut, drive carefully, go quietly back to Connecticut, and don't ever tell anybody. And that I think you can give a good utilitarian calculus for that. But then, there's the moral law. What if everybody left the scene of an accident? Would that be a better world? If you can't say it would be, you don't have any right to make an exception of yourself. And here comes, okay, J.S. Mill exits left, Immanuel Kant comes in right. And how are you going to feel about yourself? Are you the kind of person who leaves the scene of an accident, ignoring all rules and human good and so forth? And I bring it in here. Here's Aristotle teaching about virtue. And that gave me a chance in the very first class, really, or the first week of classes, to introduce the major ethical systems that we were going to have to cope with in the course of an ethics course.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, I was very pleased with it. Of course, I was teaching a night course, and we had some retired policemen, and then they pointed out that every single parking garage in New York City now has a camera which would have recorded the accident and your license plate number, and they were going to have police on your doorstep tomorrow morning in Connecticut. Oh, and you'd have the problem that you were leaving the scene of an accident. You'd be in just as much trouble as you would have been. At least when the police finally grabbed you, you wouldn't be drunk and high, which, as our Vice President Cheney pointed out to us, was something to remember when you get when you get caught shooting someone in the face. Let it go don't report it for 24 hours, because at least they won't be able to catch you drunk. Which he did. So that was basically how I taught, and I moved by the time I retired, I wasn't teaching business ethics, although I taught a course, an accelerated course, one of these 5-day wonders, in global business ethics, trying to show how the problems multiplied and divided as you went abroad with them, especially into the developing world. And I wasn't teaching bioethics because we had a really good bioethics teacher in the philosophy department by that time. So I was teaching global bioethics, the diseases. I don't think I ever taught global engineering ethics. I did teach engineering ethics. I liked engineering ethics. That was fun. But getting the engineering school to get enthusiastic about it was a little more difficult. All right, when our engineering school at Fairfield came up for reaccreditation, their professional association, ABET I think it's called, sent some people down, and they wanted to hear all about my course. So I brought them the whole syllabus and talked about engineering ethics and the guiding principle, which is the safety of the public. And they were very impressed, said very, very nice things. So that was a course I really enjoyed teaching, but the engineering school was faltering, and when you think of engineering, a real good, solid training in engineering, you don't think of a small Jesuit school. I believe they are still going. I think they got a big shot of money, and they're still going. But
one of the things that you're really well known for is your book, Taking Sides. So
Oh, yeah. Ta-da. What happened here, I searched my memory and I couldn't come up with the name of a little publishing company in Guilford, Connecticut. It was right on the waterfront, and it had these series, Taking Sides, and then it had another series of major issues and things like that. And they wanted it's not there anymore. They wanted something on business ethics, and so they got hold of me, and I took I wasn't too enthusiastic about it, but I had a colleague working with me then, non-academic, and she wanted to be part of it. So I said, okay, let's do it. And we'd do Taking Sides in business ethics, and we kept that series going until that little publishing house was bought out by some Midwestern firm. Now, it was not at that time McGraw-Hill. We ended up with McGraw-Hill, but they degraded the series until they were making so many mistakes. By the end, the last edition we published with them, which I think was the 14th, all of the articles.
that's not the 14th, because this
The
was
12th.
How would that be the 14th?
What? By the time we got to the 14th, they were making so many mistakes. As a matter of fact, in the 14th edition, I think it was, possibly the 15th, all of the articles were attributed to me, which I thought was fine, but it wasn't true. The articles were all over the lot. And McGraw-Hill had just lost track of what they were doing. You know, when I think that they thought that the series would continue to edit itself, but it wasn't. So we had to stop the series after that, which is a shame because it was one of the most useful aids to teaching, especially for instructors who had no experience whatsoever with either philosophy or business, but who were, since business ethics was now required in every business school in the country, were brought in and told they had to teach it. I could give them in the introduction here enough background in ethics so that they could at least make a show of keeping track of the class. And then with almost any other philosophy book, any other ethics book, they could teach the series. So we started, again, we had a wonderful time with it at the beginning when we were still commuting to Guilford, Connecticut. But I cannot drag from my faulty memory the name of the little publishing house that started out publishing the Taking Sides series. Anyway, it ended up with McGraw-Hill, and McGraw-Hill did a pretty darn good job for several years. They had to have a new edition every 2 years. And they got very inventive with the covers. That one is just exchanging large amounts of money.
The book, though, tell us a little bit about the book itself and how you do that.
We adopted the formula for all of the Taking Sides books, and we had a batch of them. Was to find a case and argue on one side the company should have done this, and on the other the company should have done that. And the point was that in the controversy, the students would pick up the major issues that were in dispute. And it worked. It worked. Again, by the time I retired, I had not taught business ethics for several years because my colleague who took over the program after I retired had done a wonderful job of recruiting good business ethics teachers. So I could do the ones that weren't covered elsewhere in the program.
I can't find it. It's in your Vita. It has to be in your Vita.
What?
The publisher has to be in your curriculum Vita.
Somewhere, yeah.
But I can't find it online here. I can't
Okay.
find your curriculum vitae online.
Well, let me see what I can do.
That's where it has to be.
Yeah, okay.
Can I ask you a question while Pat's searching? Of the people in the discipline, who had the most sort of direct impact on your work and career and the field in general?
Well, I came into a field studded with heroes, Ken Goodpaster being the one I followed most closely. I don't know why he didn't stay at Harvard. I don't think he was
He
let.
got fired.
He got fired. He did get.
Sorry, but we don't put that in there.
Don't put that in there.
Sorry.
Cut. All right. But he was a superb thinker. Michael Hoffman was another, and he had the advantage of being deeply embedded in a business school which appreciated him. And so he was given a free hand, and he shaped that program. Bentley program is excellent beyond words. Harvard Business School got caught up in Harvard politics, which is almost as bad as the Vatican. So you can't always get good out of that. I hung around for a while with the Yale School of Organization and Management. They had some really interesting people in there, but it didn't seem to have anything to do with business. They were more interested in NGOs. They were more interested in government and in government policy, and they hoped from that, their perch in Yale, to influence government policy on all manner of things. But trying to find the influences, outside of the fact that I found that there were excellent people, and they were not all capitalist toadies, finding that there were excellent people, just like Professor Werhane here, that kept me going. Now, these are interesting people. I hate to think that I got into academics largely because of the conversations. Just hanging out with really interesting people and enjoying their company. That doesn't sound like a reason for carrying on an enterprise in the pursuit of truth, but I think that may be truer than I think it is. That I kept running into really interesting people with really interesting ideas, and that kept me going.
Has it made a difference?
First of all, did it make a difference to me? Oh, yeah. I became a very happy person, and I've lived a very, very happy career. Did I make a difference in any business? Absolutely not. Not as far as I can tell. I'm trying to think of times when something or someone influenced a business, a corporation, a single corporation, or a business as a whole, to become more ethical, and I am reaching in vain.
Ken Goodpaster has done some good.
Ken Goodpaster has got himself embedded with some very, very good people, working with the co-principals. I was very, very pleased with that. He's done some very good work. And
Influence companies.
what?
And he's been influential in some companies.
He's been influential in some companies. Then after that, we have to go to like Darden, where Professor Werhane was working. And they have had a very strong influence on business ethics as a whole. I don't know if you've ever tried to track results for businesses, actual businesses within your purview. Have you?
We've done a few, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the things that I want to go way, way back to, you were the president of the Society for Business Ethics.
That's right.
And you want to say that. You were president.
I forgot that.
And we met in Las Vegas, and you gave a terrific paper on gambling.
Yes.
And that was very influential in never meeting in Las Vegas again.
Really?
Yes,
Okay.
including for the Academy of Management, because they met there too, and this was it, no more.
All right.
So you would say that.
All right, I certainly will. Okay, first of all, where does the Society for Business Ethics meet? I was in a part of it from the very beginning, and I was elected president of it. And I was president in the in my key year there. I had to organize the whole thing, to choose all the papers and such. That was in Miami. I can tell you that Miami is very hot in the summer. They always meet in August. It's very hot. And this is the history of the Academy of Management, with which we always meet because we have so much of an overlapping population there. They always meet in the hottest place on earth. So after Miami, we met on San Antonio, a couple of other places. Vancouver. I didn't know Vancouver. Heavens, that's right. I couldn't get there that year. But they met in Las Vegas once. Why do they meet in the hottest place on earth? Because in August, the rates for the hottest places on earth are down, and it's much less expensive to be there. All right, so it was, they were going to meet next in Las Vegas. And I hit the ceiling. I said, I don't want to go to Las Vegas. Las Vegas does terribly immoral things, and I am a moral teacher. Here I am teaching moral philosophy. I can't go to Vegas. But if we're going to Vegas, I said, I'm going to write on gambling. And then I started looking up the literature on gambling, because I had to deliver the address. You always deliver the address the semester after the year after you are president. So I started looking up gambling. All I could find was article after article on John Rawls' hypothetical lottery for infants. And why we don't do things like that. And that was useless. It had nothing to do with gambling, or gaming, as I'm told to call it. So I had to make up my own. And why don't we gamble? We don't gamble because of frugality, because we don't want to waste money. And try fitting that one into the capitalist system and see what happens. Talk about square pegs and round holes. So, all right, frugality, stewardship. There are a whole batch of virtues that lie untapped in the system in which business ethics generally flourishes, which is the business system. And actually, gaming was doing beautifully. It was making tons of money for the investors. People really enjoyed it. People would gather at 4 in the morning in some Texas towns to take a bus to a major gambling center and really enjoy themselves. And I couldn't understand it. At a gut level, I couldn't understand it. I can't gamble. I work too hard for that dollar, But here it was, and it was making people very, very happy, and it was making people a lot of money, and it wasn't hurting anybody. It's your own money. No harm, no foul. Well, I had to work around that. I had to suggest that there was, as a matter of fact, a tradition of stewardship and frugality and non-waste in the American tradition, which very sternly commanded against gambling. And that had to be taken into account if we're going to talk about the gaming industry, which is profitable, dollar signs, dollar signs, dollar signs. And very few people, as a matter of fact, I think I've had one commentator in the history since then. And I can't even remember what the commentator said. It was a paper I couldn't get hold of. I have no idea why. I think I was in transit or something. But there's been very little discussion of it, and I don't know where the discussion would go. Can business ethics take a stand saying that there are certain, as it were, anti-capitalist virtues which it is worthwhile to pursue and preserve? I don't know if it can. Maybe there are other forms of ethics that can. So that's where that's right, and that's why we haven't been back to Vegas.
Yes.
Yes.
We've not been back to Vegas, nor has the Academy of Management.
All right.
Nor will they go back.
Okay.
I don't think. I will say Ken Goodpasture has a article on goods, and so he would argue with you on this. And I don't know where it is right at the moment. We're looking it up.
Okay,
but because he mentions it, but then it turns out to be, by the way, it's something else.
okay.
So anyway, all right. Well, now anything else I'm going to look at. If you'd hand me taking sides, I'm going to look inside and see if I can find that publisher.
Okay,
But anyway, anything else you want to add?
Mm-hmm.
This has been great.
good.
This is just what we want.
Let's see if I can think of anything else.
Anything else you'd like to add?
I'm thinking.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, I will add. My last book, the one that is still, should be in production, I don't know if it is called Urban Agriculture. It's on the beauties and joys of farming in the city. And I take some cities like Havana and Detroit and Burlington to show the uses of urban agriculture. And so I was in the process of putting this book together when I understood that Bob Kolb, an old friend of mine, was putting together an encyclopedia of business ethics. And it's great. So I went up to Bob and I said, so who's doing agriculture? Because I'd like to help work on that one. And he looked at me like I'd come from some other planet. Agriculture. And I said, yes, it's a business. Oh, I guess it is. So anyway, I did all of the agricultural entries. And I did agriculture itself, agricultural ethics. I did Archer Daniels Midland, a couple of other companies in there that I just sort of inserted into his encyclopedia. But when where we're going in business ethics, I want us to take agriculture and the food system very, very seriously. Right now, it seems to be off in its own little column. They'll tell you, you can go to the University of Vermont, they'll tell you everything you need to know to grow perfect organic apples. They've got a wonderful agricultural school there. It's just great. But when you run up against the capitalist system, they say, oh, well, that's the way the system works. And nothing you can do about that, right?
Do you think the natural capital movement has taken the mantle on it?
The natural capital movement. Okay, natural capitalism, are we talking about?
Natural capital, it's a movement, certainly it's growing in Europe.
Oh.
They're trying to put, capitalistic values, etc., on the natural environment
Well, how about putting the natural environment values on capitalism, which is what I think I'd like to see. I'm kind of on the fringe of business ethics in that I honestly think that the fundamental presuppositions of business have to be examined and modified. Not necessarily. Sometimes you get this, what do you call it? It's like that urn that is two faces looking at each other,
Yes, Janice.
What?
Janice.
Janice.
Yeah.
Janice, yeah. I think you may be able to say that these are 2 points of view, that it's really the same thing we're talking about. From inside a business, you can talk about the need for good public relations. From the outside, you can talk about good moral behavior, and the two might actually turn out to be the same thing we're talking about. So there's, I think there's a theoretical discussion that has to enter the literature somewhere, saying how are we supposed to look at the place of moral behavior in business? Is it a complete block? Now, if you go back into the history of capitalism, that's what it was. No, you can't, grab resources and people and things like that and use them just for your own profit or for the profit of the people who have given you money. You've got to have some worthwhile purpose, and you couldn't get permission to be a corporation until you had that worthwhile purpose. And it was my worthwhile purpose is making money was a latecomer, and sometime it was really into the 18th or 19th century we got.
Without,
What?
just to interrupt, those were called joint stock companies,
Yeah.
not corporations. They weren't called corporations.
Okay.
Until until they had limited life, unlimited life and unlimited liability,
Yeah.
and where they took out so the owners are not liable,
That's right.
and then they took out you have to do good works.
They took that out, yeah.
And letters patent.
Hmm?
And letters patent. Can I ask you,
Sure.
across your work, you've healthcare, you've agriculture and everything. Do you see a sort of a vertical integration of the systemic in, say, K Street or something like that, where you have everything from the corn syrup lobby, creating a diabetic problem, creates healthcare issues, creates health insurance, and then of course these are all then able to, have a great influence on the political system itself as well as the capital system.
Yeah. There are those who've suggested dropping a bomb in K Street, because once people realize that they can utilize their neighbors to help make themselves rich, you will get partnerships, very strong and beautiful partnerships between the self-enrichers. And if my lobbying can help out your lobbying, fine, and yours can help out mine. Again, where do these lobbyists fit in the capitalist system? They're not making money for anybody except themselves. Oh, but they're influencing legislation. Yes, but that's not part of capitalism, is it? Well, it is now. And the activities of capitalism, which can be harmful in and of themselves, manage to get themselves doubly and triply harmful when they corrupt, influence the structures of government that are supposed to be governing them. So it's what we call legislative capture. And we know this came up again in the 738 Max case, because
Is that the 737?
737? Yeah, okay.
737 Max.
737 Max, I'm sorry. Yeah, the 738 was on the drawing boards, but it never got off the ground, literally.
That's why the 737 is a Frankenstein.
Yeah. 737. Did you find anything?
No.
Okay.
It's there somewhere, but I can't find it.
Okay, well, let me.
It's in your Vita. Do you have your Vita ever anywhere?
Yeah.
Well, you can look it up and send it to me.
Okay, but I don't think I have the earliest publishers of taking sides.
But in your Vita you might.
No, I don't think so.
Really?
I don't think so. But I'll
It doesn't matter. I'm just curious. I know the name of his publishers right at the tip of my tongue.
yeah.
We'll be able to look it up on ISBN.
We'll look it up on ISBN.
Okay, I'll look it up
That's
too.
a good idea.
Okay.
That's a better idea than my idea. Okay.
Okay.
I'll look it up. And I'll let you know what it is.
All right. But it was a cute little publisher, and Mimi, the editor, can't remember her last name, used to come down to our annual gathering at the end of our program year. It was just nice. We were. It was a small state, a small publisher, a small college, and then McGraw-Hill got a hold of it and managed to foul it up. So I think that series is now dead.
You like the intimacy, I think, of that small thing.
Yeah.
Tell me a bit about Fairfield, and you happy there?
I was very happy there.
What was it about that environment?
Well, first of all, Fairfield is the New England college that you picture in your imagination. Small trees all over campus, shuffling through the dead leaves in fall, snow in winter, heat in summer. It was, and the Long Island Sound was right there. We had a sailboat. That was our summer vacation. It was just an ideal setting. Now, it is still, except there are now twice as many buildings on those rolling campuses, including an incredibly huge glass. Everything was sort of brick until recently. And it's got a huge glass business school, and it's horribly out of place, but never mind. But it was, you knew people, you knew everybody. It was good.
Dushkin.
Got it. Dushkin, yes.
So thank you for ISBN instead of what I was doing.
And so tell me, has the way of teaching business ethics changed since you began?
Not that I would know of. There was my sidekick in bioethics in the philosophy department had totally different ways of teaching. He taught machine teaching. He did quizzes with a little clicker. I didn't understand it. So there are going to be technological changes all around. But beyond that, what you're trying to do is get the students thinking, talking, reasoning, and realizing that there's a lot to be thought of there. Nothing has changed.
But one of the things that you were with there are quite a few people who've done this, was to think about how do you do cases.
Oh yeah.
Because that's not everybody did that in the beginning.
Was that based on Harvard case?
No, it wasn't based on the Harvard case. Matter of fact, you had to pay a lot of money for a Harvard case, and they were much too long and complicated for our undergraduate students. So I did my own case writing, and I didn't bring it along with me, but I do have a case book called Wake Up Calls, in which I just have 10 classic cases of business ethics. I put these together for my own benefit only, because I could not remember the year, I couldn't remember the names, you know. So that's why I put the cases together, and then eventually published them. First, very successfully, cases in environmental ethics, through again Wadsworth, which again was taken over by somebody else, and then and they did wake-up calls too. All on the model of Gregory Pence's cases in bioethics. And that apparently sold very, very well, because you can educate them with stories much more easily than educate them with setting forth theory. So I'd sneak in the theory toward the end of the case.
Well, this is great.
Okay.
This is just what we wanted. Thank you.
Can I ask you one last one, Lisa? If you had a young business or student of business ethics coming in for the first time, what's the one piece of advice or from your long career you give?
I'd have to know where he's coming from. I have to know why he wants to know. Or she. I'd have to know where. Okay, I've got an advisee now at the University of Vermont. From her senior project, she needs me as an advisor. Oh, no, I'm sorry. She's in high school. This is a high school senior project, and she wants to do sustainable farming. No problem. I've got a whole library on sustainable farming. Come on over. What I'm telling her, first of all, is, why do you like it? What's driving you? And she turns out to have a real passion for the soil, for healthy growing things, as opposed to all of this junk you get in the processed food aisles. Great. We can work with that. And I can feed that. I can give her 42 books to read between now and next Thursday, and I'm very much enjoying it. And if a student came in to say I wanted to do a project on business ethics, I'd ask him, well, okay, where are you going? Are you going into business, or are you going into some other field? And let's talk about the perspectives of that field or the perspectives of the business. First of all, don't go in, if you're going into business, don't go into your first interview saying, I'm an expert in business ethics, because that will get you fired more than, that'll get you taken off the list quicker than anything else.